All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Major blow to the Canadian automotive sector, major blow to the Canadian economy. President Donald Trump imposing a 25% tariff on light cars, trucks, and auto parts made outside the U.S. effective April 2nd. This move adds to the ongoing tariffs on steel and aluminum, aimed at boosting the American auto industry while raising $100 billion in custom duties for the United States. It has shocked the automotive sector. It's highly integrated. We know this. The automotive sector is highly integrated. Canada, U.S., and Mexico. We're seeing some stock drops amongst the major car manufacturers. Let's find out where we go from here. Greg Layson, digital editor over at Automotive News Canada. He's on the line. Greg, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, I think we've had a discussion on this show where you truly believed, because of the conversation you've had with the insiders in the automotive industry, that we wouldn't get here, that we wouldn't end up with these tariffs. Lo and behold, it seems like we are there. I don't know. Let's start off on that. Just how real is this now?
I would say we're almost there. If you look in the fine print, these levies will only apply to the non-U.S. share of the vehicles from Canada and Mexico. Tariffs on parts from Canada and Mexico that comply with the current USMCA will not take effect until the U.S. sets up a process to collect those levies. So while, the headline number is 25% tariff on vehicles from Canada, it's not on all of the parts within that vehicle. It's not on all the parts that are sent from here to America and used in American vehicles. So, I think we took a step toward tariffs, but I'm really interested in the fine print here, because how is the United States going to go about collecting this? This is not going to happen by April 3rd. How are they going to come up with a system to sort of divvy up and decide what parts are American, what parts are Canadian, and how much of that final assembly are we actually going to tax when it comes across the border? So I would say we're in the early stages, but we're not at the finish line.
Do we have like a real world example, like a car that many of our listeners maybe have bought in the last little while, and just how, as stated right now, these tariffs would affect that vehicle?
I would say I would go this route. I would say what we build in Canada, about 30% of the parts come from America, and 60% of those parts are built in Canada. So 60% of those parts in that final assembly are going to be taxed when they head south. Another example is we build the engines for the Ford Mustang and the Ford F-150 Super Duty right here in Windsor, Ontario. Those engines right now are compliant with the USMCA, but when they cross the border, and if and when they do collect duties on those, the price will increase to the tune of, hold your hat, $700 million a year of cost to Ford. Now, who pays that? You and I, when all of those trucks that are assembled in America are sent back to us and we purchase them. The consumer on both sides of the border are going to pay more for their vehicles, even if all of the production moves to America, and that's because we are a lower cost jurisdiction when it comes to automobile assembly. Why did all the jobs leave Canada in the 90s due to NAFTA and went to Mexico? Because they could be built more cheaply in Mexico, and that keeps the cost of an automobile down. No matter how this pans out, everyone in North America is going to be paying more for their vehicles.
So let me ask you about the uncertainty here, because as you outlined, we're still trying to figure out, well, even the mechanisms to even charge some of these things, right? But it leads to uncertainty. It's not lost on me that in the midst of that uncertainty, there are big decisions being made. Hyundai announcing this week they're going to build a plant where? In the United States. Do you think by design that what they're just trying to do is create so much uncertainty that the business decisions are made to build plants in the U.S., and that's maybe the bigger part of the story here?
I do. I think Donald Trump has put these all in place to force automakers to announce their next round of investments be in the United States. So if Ontario was in a dogfight with Alabama, let's say, for an auto plant, this uncertainty makes it easier for an automaker to say, you know what, I'm just going to choose Alabama because we know there is no chance of duties and tariffs if we build our next model in Alabama, if we invest and build our next plant in Ohio. So it becomes a loss of investment in Canada, but not necessarily a loss of the auto production and the auto parts supply that we have right now. This is now, for Canada, a game of maintaining its footprint and not losing jobs. I think what it does is means we won't get future investment.
Now, let me just ask you for our listeners here, what's the Quebec angle on this, on car parts that are made here? How many jobs are at risk in Quebec, for instance, when it comes to tariffs?
I don't know how many would be at risk, but I can tell you there's about 5,000 to 7,000 Quebecers working in the auto industry, in the supply chain. And there's also, above and beyond that, there is now some R&D and software technology jobs coming and cropping up in Quebec. So those two are there as well. So it is, while not as robust as Ontario, there are jobs in Quebec. In fact, in 2018, a supplier to Tesla, which supplies aluminum stamped parts, got an $11 million investment from the government to help expand. So we know that there are parts, even for the quote-unquote most American-made vehicle, Teslas, has connections to Mexico and Canada when it comes to parts. No one is immune from these tariffs.
Do you want there to be a response from the Canadian government that will involve our own tariffs? What do you think happens there if we escalate? What are your thoughts on Canada saying, okay, you're gonna tariff us, we're gonna tariff you?
I mean, this is how trade wars traditionally play out, isn't it? I mean, this is always the logical and most obvious next step, is that the country being affected first retaliates second. And we've seen that. You know, we've seen Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, remove American whiskey off the shelves of the provincially owned liquor store. And we've seen the CEO of Jack Daniel's say that's actually worse than tariffs. So there is going to be a response in some way, and it will be targeted, because we're trying as a country to send the message to Donald Trump that these tariffs hurt your auto consumers, and then our retaliation hurts your other industries. So please repeal this tariff policy.
So let me just ask you, for the sake of our listeners who are looking at buying a vehicle, do you have a timeline here? And do you have a suggestion? Hey, you want to buy a car? Buy it now. Don't wait a month. Don't wait 2 months, because the price will go up. What's your timeline here? And do you have a recommendation on people to, maybe if they have to buy a car, to buy it sooner than later?
Yeah, we have analysts that we talk to already saying the price hikes will be, quote, almost immediate. And so you can start to figure on prices rising sooner rather than later. Look, the auto industry is not unlike anything else. Prices never seem to go down, right? And so this is just going to exacerbate that situation and increase the pricing. So yes, if you're in the market for a vehicle, now's the time to start looking, because as I said, Canadian parts that go to the United States and are put into a vehicle that's shipped back here, that price is going to be passed on to the consumers in Canada as well. So if you're looking for a vehicle, now's the time to shop.
Greg, thanks for breaking all of this down. Really appreciate talking to you, especially on a morning like this. Thanks again.
Anytime.
Greg Layson, digital editor over at Automotive News Canada.